Who is this supposed to be? Just a fat American or Chris?
I don't know, I'm sure it's written.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
What?
Love your hair.
Yeah, he says not just in the Arabs,
Thanks.
but throughout the Islamic world. I've read about this many times, and I've never read about it in this much detail, an entire book on it, but it's throughout the Islamic world.
What are we talking about?
These anti-Semitic images.
The anti-Semitism in the Arab world, and then I will transfer it to Israel.
And yeah,
I just,
throughout the Islamic world.
I just,
The problem when we do the readings that I assigned, they are very much mea culpa, you know, they're depicting the shades of Israeli policies and challenges to democracy, which are in many cases are correct, but never present a broader, fuller picture how it works on both sides. So we will do it today.
I just read the article from, it's a, from, what's her name? Liz, Turakov or something, the Russian young woman who has just been arrested in just 2 months ago.
Elected what?
Arrested in Iraq.
Yeah,
And that really scares me.
They'll probably kill her.
Well, she
no,
apparently,
she was told not to go there.
well, she was told, but at the same time, she's a so-called Princeton protected person. But
No one is protected.
exactly.
No, a friend of hers is in the ER, so
She's a friend of it's Sharansky's daughter who wrote the article.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll wait a minute or two, or what? We need to
A couple
put,
people are signing in.
yeah, online.
May I see
Yeah,
that?
it's
book?
really
What is this book?
fascinating.
Is this a book we're working with?
No.
No, I just,
What is it? I'm sorry. I
Eric,
can't read it.
Eric.
look at the picture, I put the sign with the picture.
The sound's not on. Yeah, that's what I am.
Are we using it?
We use it for other people who join us.
Oh, I'm talking,
online.
got it.
Yeah.
So don't say anything you don't want to be heard. Right, Charles?
Oh, you. Speaker.
That's my entire life. Don't say anything you don't want.
Okay, Judy is on. Anybody, and Ed, who else? Anybody else on?
Somebody sitting next to me yesterday said, where's that sound coming from? Where's that voice coming
Oh,
from?
that was when it was.
Hello?
Elstein, that was.
Yes, Richard, what's happened?
I can't find the link to get into the.
Okay, here is
That's
the
why I'm here.
guru of the link.
You could not find the link?
What is his phone number?
Phone number 612-770.
Give me a second. 612,
770-9247.
yes, okay.
Hey,
Now I just have to get the link
Okay,
and send it to you. Tell him to give me about 2 minutes.
Janet,
2 minutes.
yesterday,
thanks, Ari.
Sure.
I have been trying to engage
Hi,
him
Leslie.
in conversation,
Who?
Dan, the Finn guy that
Um,
comes every week.
Hello. Yeah.
The rabbi?
Well,
That's actually, that's Rabbi Lebanon,
I thought of
Dan. Do you know what he is?
Okay, if you saw it.
He is a lawyer in the Illinois.
Okay, we'll wait 2 minutes.
what?
Other people are
Lawyer in the
start
appellate
trying to
court.
join in.
Very bright,
We're by no means the last.
Really?
and we got him talking.
Is he the one that sits on the other side?
Very skinny.
Yeah. Gay vase.
That's right.
Okay, okay.
Who would know, right?
What? Okay, very soon.
You know, I was trying to engage this gentleman who talks to people. He's very quiet, you know, Dan. So I
Dan
found,
Rose?
yes, yeah, now he talks to me. He sits
Oh,
and
good.
talks to me, and he's a lawyer in the Illinois appellate court.
Wow.
Very bright guy.
So I said, gay vase, you never know.
That's right.
That's Sheila. What does Sheila want?
We're having a problem getting on.
Hey, Suzanne.
And who's up
That
on
what
the
you
right?
said?
Yeah.
This is my friend
That's your
from
friend from
Minnesota.
Minnesota?
Yeah.
So,
Leslie and Merrill, I believe.
Hello, Leslie and Merrill.
And where's your friend Richard?
And Rick-
Hello.
Yeah.
where's the link? You
Yes.
put the calendar, right?
I got the calendar, yeah.
You found
Here's the
it.
link to it.
I just sent it to him.
Okay,
Now,
Link should
let me ask you
we
a
are
silly,
going to see it soon,
a silly question.
and that will be a sign to start.
Where's the calendar?
Is
I
the
don't see
link
it.
for every
It's in
meeting
the
the
calendar.
same?
I
Yes.
found it in your calendar.
If we use the same
My
one.
calendar.
So
Typically,
typically for things that are in the same category, like services are always the same. Adult education is usually Jewish journeys, but there are some times when we make a new link, especially for something that we think we're gonna use over and over again, because it's easier to identify for us when we're assigning things. But other than
There.
that, things that are the same
So
all
it's
the time,
here.
it's
Right.
it's usually the same link.
Would you send it to
Get
me?
info.
For this,
So that she has it.
Last week I couldn't get on
couldn't
because
find it?
I had a thing that said something about holiday, whichever, and I was like.
Um,
Me, I'm 2 minutes away from here.
Drive over.
I just logged in. I'm good.
there. Maybe that'll do.
Can we, shall we
Yeah, let's-
easy on? Okay,
I don't know, is he 0-13P?
he was all the time here. I don't, yeah, I see it. I don't know. Usually we see him.
Who is it?
013P is Ori.
Oh, Richard.
Richard,
Oh.
are you on?
He was always on.
Well, I just sent him
Yeah, the link,
well, I sent him the ID and the password.
right.
to join.
Because he's every week
You
here.
there?
Okay, let's hope he's here.
Where's Sophie?
Boker Tov, good morning. I would like to start, as I am trying to do every week, with the latest in the demonstration in Israel. And as I told you, YNET have direct transmission every Saturday night for 2 hours. So last night, the main feature with over 100,000 people in Tel Aviv,
Oh, my God.
that was Dan Meridor, a member of the Likud party, a person who was Minister of Justice under a previous Netanyahu administration. He is regarded one of the princelings, which means his father was one of the founder of Cherut. He was
Beirut.
of Cherut. He was one of the leaders of the Irgun. I'm saying it in order to demonstrate that the leadership of the Likud and Cherut, most of them are shocked and disgusted by what is happening in under this attempt to dismantle Israeli democracy and dismantle the authority of the Supreme Court in Israel.
Okay, so if somebody asked me that question, who is responsible? Because I'm gonna be asked that this afternoon. I'm going to my Chavurah, Raw, and that's what we're talking about. What do I say?
Netanyahu.
Okay, all right.
Netanyahu
Can
and
I-
his partners.
And
His
Can I
partners
ask a question?
his partner.
partners in the Likud,
Okay,
Is she
the
there?
extremists.
Hold on a second, Maury.
because I don't like to give wrong answers. Thank you.
No.
Maury has a question.
No, it wasn't Maury.
My question is this, I would request, can
Who is
you,
this?
this
Maury
is
Gold.
Ori.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Maury
Oh, Gottlieb,
Sorry,
sorry.
Gottlieb.
Yeah, we cannot see you. Are you in
Come
hiding?
on,
or-
Ori. Show your punim.
I'm not hiding, I'm in my car.
Oh, okay, that's good enough. Okay. Drive safely. What is the question?
I always, I'm shocked as well, of course. But I always try to understand the other point of view. So in good faith, can you make an argument in favor of what Netanyahu is trying to do?
No. No.
I mean, I don't think Netanyahu
If
is
you
saying,
want-
I want total control. I want the government to have total power and control and become a dictatorship. What is
Look,
the argument?
he doesn't say it. He said, no, we just need some modification. But the reality is that he's going to stand trial on corruption. And he wants to dismantle the ability of the court to put him on trial. It's
Does
as
that sound like somebody? you know?
simple as that.
Sounds
This
like
is one
America.
thing.
They're
The
friends.
other thing, they want to create a system that the process to elect judges will not be what is happening now. As I mentioned earlier, it's a composition of members of the Bar Association, members of the Supreme Court, members of the government and the Knesset, opposition and coalition, which create a situation that you have an impartial and a professional system to elect judges, and we know that it's impartial and professional because today the Chief Justice is from the Likud original leadership. A previous one was from the Labor so-called camp, but they all act in unison when it comes to addressing issue of legal importance. So you have always a combination of the people who belong to either left or right in the political spectrum. All of them are against this attempt to overhaul and create a situation, first of all, of election of the judges. The government want to have a full control of it. In fact, the current Minister of Justice want to dismantle the committee that elect judges because it's impartial. He wanted to be totally partial. This is one thing. The other thing now, the Attorney General is elected, someone asked me the other time, last week, by a committee that is composed of members of the Bar Association, member of the Knesset and the Supreme Court. And it's impartial. It's all about professional election of Attorney General. And if you go on the list from the 1990s, it's fluctuates between people with affiliation to Labor and people with affiliation to a right-wing camp. Tells you something about impartiality and professionalism. So now they want to fire this Attorney General who said that in some cases, a person like Deri is supposed to be a minister, he was already convicted, spent time in jail on corruption charges. He came back again as a leader of a religious Sephardi party of Shas. They want to nominate him and override the law of the land. If you are convicted of a felony, you cannot serve in government, period. They want to override and dismantle.
So they'll have every crook in the.
So every crook can be a member of Knesset.
What's the name
Now
of the
they
woman
want.
from Weizmann Institute?
Just let me finish this one. They want to dismantle, basically to get rid of the Attorney General. They are afraid to do it yet because of the demonstration. 4 weeks ago, they tried to Netanyahu tried to fire the Minister of Defense. There was such an uproar and the country went on strike. I mean, all the labor union and all the state hospitals were closed. Now it's going to happen, I think, again. There is a day of rage on Tuesday, and yesterday, Dan Meridor, the main feature speaker in Tel Aviv, said, basically, we need to create something. This is an illegitimate government that rules in defiance of the will of the people. They want to create a state that looks like Hungary, which dismantle the elements of democracy. And we know that Netanyahu is a very good friend of Orban, the leader in Hungary. So this is the main issue. Yesterday, leaders of all the universities came with a statement of raising concern about the fact that the freedom of speech will be undermined in the university the same way that it happened in Hungary, where departments are being dismantled and basically deprived of funds.
The what?
Deprived of funds.
Uh-huh.
So if you are deprived of funds, guess what? You have to close departments. Liberal art department in Hungary, in some places, are basically closed. And some of them, of the faculty, relocated to Vienna and act from there and try to teach.
So why did Shoroshki all of a sudden grow a big nose? I don't understand.
You
Why?
don't understand what?
Why Shorosh managed to grow a big nose? He's as anti-Semitically depicted precisely like.
Let's not,
like
I
these
don't
guys.
want to distract, that's a different class. Source has nothing to do some has to do with Israel by the funding NGOs. So,
Okay,
but I don't want to go there yet. I will go other classes in a systematic way. I want to depict the situation now in Israel, how dire
The
and
situation.
dangerous it is.
and if all of us,
Today, let me finish, but to
Sure.
tell you the outline. Members of Israeli elite forces who are volunteer after the age of 45 decided they are not going to volunteer anymore. I'm talking Sayeret Matkal, Shayetet, which are I'm not familiar with the American Marine Elite Corps.
Green Berets,
What?
Green Berets.
But yeah, I'm talking the
Special-
elite
SEAL-
special forces.
Okay.
Special forces who are serving after the age of 45 are deciding not to volunteer anymore. 300 pilots who volunteer after the age of 44 to service decided to decline going to annual practices in airplanes as of today. Terrible, never happened in the history of the country, something like that.
I wanted to mention that on CBS Sunday Morning, they had an Israeli whose name escaped me. Did you remember?
Call his name.
Who said,
Yuval Harari.
who
Yes.
said pretty much exactly what you've been saying, that the government is trying to get rid of the Supreme Court so there won't be any checks and balances.
Absolutely. And it's important to note that they try to depict the government and its allies, try to depict the government. It's a very limited group. Within the Likud, there is antagonism to the government as well, behind the scene in quiet voices. Horrible situation. It's important to know, which I try to emphasize, that the current Supreme Court and Attorney General office were always fluctuated between people with affiliation to Labor or Likud or in the middle, independent. And the criteria for choosing them was always professional, not affiliation to party loyalty.
Good.
That's important to know. They try to say differently, but it's not true. The reality, if you do a checklist of all these people, you know it. And that's the reason I gave you Dan Meridor, a justice minister 15 years ago in a Likud administration run by Netanyahu. He served also as a minister of finance. And this Dan Meridor, who helped basically open the Israeli economy in the early 2000s. Important to note, because he's a very capable person, he left politics. He cannot stand the Likud as it is run today. And the leader, Shikma, who is a professor of physics at the Weizmann Institute, read a letter of a soldier, and soldiers who cannot talk because they are in a,
Mhm.
they are in military service. And he gave a talk, like Churchillian speech. We are going to fight on the beaches. We are going to fight on the shore. We are going to fight in exile. We will never give up the right of Israel to have a viable and vibrant democracy. It's unbelievable. A 20 years old kid,
What's the name of
This-
that woman that you told us about?
Shikma Bressler,
Wrestler?
She's a combination, a Sephardi and Ashkenazi.
Okay. It sounds like an American name.
She's unbelievable,
Yeah.
unbelievable. And it's important to know that it's not professional politicians. These are people, a genuine people from the country who are concerned about the country. If continuously 28 weeks, you have over 100 to 150,000 people coming to this demonstration. It's the entire country. It's people, it's adults, their children, grandchildren, all of them are coming. I'll tell you an anecdotal story. We are going to Israel in November, my wife and I, and we have a tour guide. And we are going with the family, some members of our family. This guy was in a demo 2 weeks ago, he was in a demonstration and a grenade was thrown at him and he was wounded in his face. His face was burned. This guy is 65 years old.
I
65.
thought they weren't hostile. The demonstration.
No, the police threw a grenade at him.
Right.
It's a shock grenade, it's not an explosive. And people are hurting not much. It didn't get yet to the point of violence. And the Shikma Bressler, she said, we are demonstrating peacefully, underlining peacefully, with no violence. Skirmishes are happening when they have provocateurs of the Likud who are trying to engage in fights. But there is always, most of the time, you have a police that's separating between the camps. The demonstrators are by far the largest. Yesterday, there were close to 200,000 all over the country.
Is it once a week, Aria, that they do
On
it?
Saturday night, they
Shabbat.
try
What's
to
it
do it
Shabbat?
after
Shabbat.
Shabbat, but because
It's late.
the late days are long, it happened during Shabbat. In Haifa, which is a red city, it happened around 4 o'clock. Main piazza in Carmel Mountain. In Tel Aviv, it's Kaplan, you can see it all the time. And in then you have in Karkur. In Karkur, a very good friend of mine is the organizer. And at one point, we need to coordinate the logistics, how it works. I may be able to bring them over here on Zoom.
Oh,
But we need to have they will come only if there is a large crowd, and we need to organize how it will work out. I have a very good friend who was the Undersecretary of Defense, Alon Schuster. We will see if he will be able to come.
are the Orthodox involved in this?
Orthodox, there are some of them who are with the demonstration. And I'm not sure about the dynamics. I have family members who are religious. I don't call them. But
I have
I'm
a
a-
family
I-
member who's religious and. they
Now,
go to
you have a Satmar family, right?
No, I don't.
No, okay.
No, I have absolutely no Fatma, but I have a religious cousin
And
and they are absolutely against Netanyahu. She said to me in English, and her English is not her first language, obviously. She said to me, we don't hate him, we loathe him. When she said that word, I said, Judith, her name is Judith also, and she said, Judith, I said, Judith, are you using the word as you
Correctly.
intended to?
Yeah.
I said, are you saying a loathe? And she said, we loathe him. I get sick thinking that I have him as my prime minister.
Yeah.
Did she vote for him?
Well, no, and and her husband is used to be a professor in addition to being a research scientist. When I asked him what he does, he told me that I can't tell you, if I tell you, I have to shoot you. He works for Raphael.
Oh,
So,
wow, okay.
yes.
Oh, yeah, I have another question.
Are you
It's okay.
driving?
I'm still driving. You may have covered this in a previous session. I'm sorry. Can you just briefly say why Israel doesn't have a constitution? And
Oh, God.
Yeah,
That's a big question.
You
I'm
missed.
sorry I missed it.
We had a full class on that one.
They are
All
English.
right, all right. I'll watch the reviews on YouTuber.
Okay, good.
But
Thank you.
the short one is on religious ground. I mean, the religious party said that the Torah is our constitution. So it gives you some
Enough.
indication, and you need to create Israel is composed of coalition. You have parties that are coming together, and how do you do it? You need always to have religious party in the coalition. If not, look what is happening.
We are our own worst
It's
enemy.
a problem. It's a problem. Yeah. Okay, now, after having this discussion, which is important, and I will continue it with it. I'll talk at the very end how we continue. This is the first cycle that we end today, and I will continue and we'll discuss it. We are coming now to our readings. The first reading that I ask you to do is about freedom of the press, Kol Ha'am. What do you think about this story of Kol Ha'am and Al-Itihad? Al-Itihad means the union. It's the oldest Arab newspaper in Israel, established in 1944 under British mandate, and it exhibited on its pages the best scholarship and literary figure of the Arab-Israeli public. Over the years, Amil Habibi is the editor for 50 years, and he died. And then Darwish is considered to be the Mark Twain of the equivalent of Mark Twain or Robert Frost, or I mean, he is icon of Palestinian nationalism. When you read his literature and poetry, you are dumbfounded by the level of hatred of Jews. I'll say this. If you want, I have a collection of his poetry in English. We can do I'll think about what to do. But now something about Al-Itihad. Al-Itihad is located in downtown Haifa. You know, I was born in Haifa and raised in a mixed neighborhood of Arab and Jews.
Me too. Rehov Asfor.
Me too, me too, me too, me too. I was born in Rambam.
Asfor,
Ari too?
Atzfo?
right near the Nahal.
Near the,
Ori Janet Malonic is trying to tell Aryeh where in Haifa she was born. So when she finishes, you can jump in. We'll let you know.
In between.
I was born in Rambam.
Rambam Hospital.
in Rambam, I was born
Rambam.
too. We are all Rambam.
We
Hallelujah.
are
to-
all Rambam.
Yeah, you're all
Still
All
in
of
the
my
car.
cousins were born.
Were you born in Haifa? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Rambam, and then my parents moved to Rehovot, and then we moved to the States.
Oh, Rehovot, okay. How long did you spend in Haifa aside from being born there?
Just a couple years. My father was a medical school at Technion.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, okay.
His father's an anesthesiologist.
And at that time, the Technion, when was it? In the 70s, 60s?
70. I was born in 72.
Oh, okay. You're a young person. So in
Thank you.
72, when you were born, you probably lived where I lived in the 70s, near Kiryat Technion in Neve Sha'anan. So we probably ran into your dad from time to time.
Could be, could be.
Now, Al-Itihad was in downtown Haifa, in what is known as Wadi Nisnas. In 2006, there was a war between Israel and Hezbollah. I'm not sure if you remember that.
I was there.
During that, in 2006,
I was there with Melton.
when it happened, when the war started.
Yeah, I was in Haifa with my family, and then I got on the train to go to Tel Aviv, and all of a sudden I hear we're at war.
Yeah, and there was a hit. They tried to hit the Haifa port, and they did manage to hit an area, and they killed people 8 individuals who were working in this facility. But they hit also the Arab neighborhood of Wadi Nisnas, and there was a direct hit on the newspaper of Al-Itihad. The building was demolished. They rebuilt it now. It's ironic, it's said irony of the calamities of war, but the Arab neighborhood of Wadi Nisnas was suffered a major hit in that short 2 weeks war. Just an anecdotal story. So here is the story. What is happening with the story of Kol Ha'am and Al-Itihad? You recall the story? You read it?
Yeah, I read it, but do I remember it?
Who read it and want to talk 2 points? Maybe a cookie. I just wondered if people are reading, or I will
I
repeat
read
it.
it, but I don't remember.
So there is in 1952, 1953, there is a Korean War. Haaretz camp was a scoop, so-called scoop, that said the following: Israel is volunteering, will send $200,000 soldiers to fight with the United States against the Soviet Union and its allies in Korea.
Isn't that ironic?
It was bogus, of course, it didn't happen. And
Yeah.
Ben-Gurion and the Knesset said, it's a wild story, never happened. The problem was that Kol Ha'am and Al-Itihad, which are communists affiliated to the Soviet Union of Stalin, received money from the Soviet Union, everything is really communist. They came, what are we going to do? These imperialist Zionists are going to fight against the mother of all nations, our beloved Soviet Union. As a result, a minister of the Interior decided to suspend, using emergency rule of 1933, to suspend for 15 days and maybe beyond the publication of those newspapers. And they said, hey, how come you are doing it on the Knesset? Haaretz said it, we took it from Haaretz. Go to the course.
So this is this guy again, this Agranat,
Agranat, yeah, well, Agranat is
saying his opinion on what
right,
happened.
exactly,
Yeah, and then
exactly.
here, I remember I drew a line under this, but it was a landmark opinion, which has since become the cornerstone of Israeli constitutional
Which
law.
freedom of the press.
Yeah,
And reference, for the first time, the reference is to the Declaration of Independence. So Declaration of Independence, which just was a declaration, has an element of constitution, a binding element of a constitution that yet to be written. Now, I want to come to the demonstration. Alon Schuster, the Undersecretary of Defense in the previous administration, came and say on Friday, we are facing a fight. We are on the verge almost of a civil war between defenders of the principle of the Declaration of Independence and those who want to dismantle it. So now you have it. It's a continuum. We now have a pressure to really negotiate and write a constitution based on the principle of the Declaration of Independence, in view of this attempt to dismantle Israeli democracy by Netanyahu and his cohorts. And so we are back to this issue of a Declaration of Independence. And that was a major issue. It's very important to note freedom of expression, freedom of speech is ingrained and important. If you read the Israeli papers from 1948 through forever, they are always contentious over fighting against each other. You have plethora of opinions debated, negotiated, and spoken out continuously, much more than the United States. You remember the 50s, the Red Scare, McCarthy. Could you express an opinion on favor of communism in those days? You're a traitor. Israel did it continuously. You have all the opinions expressed.
Okay.
Under situation of war, Israel is continuously up to 67, was in state of war continuously with all its neighbors.
I used to ride the bus to school, and there was, this is in the 50s, from 50 to 54, there was a sign on the bus that said, it used to scare me, Ivan is watching you.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, here you have it.
Well, in the 50s, I remember my father kind of played with the idea of communism. And we used to go to these movies that Russia sent.
Where do you go? Is here or there?
There,
In the Haifa?
yeah.
Where did you go? Hadar?
I think.
Armon?
The
Hadar? Wow, we were neighbors.
We were sitting next to each other in the movies.
Presented it, sponsoring it, I mean.
the Russian Communist
The
Party.
Communist Party was.
So he was kind of playing with it, and he almost got into trouble when he started to apply for a visa to
To
come
the
to
US.
this.
Yeah, because they thought
Look,
it was
to the present day, I became an American citizen in 1998. It's against the law. They still ask me if I'm affiliated or was affiliated to the
With the
Communist
Communist
Party. We are not supposed to ask it anymore. It's very funny. When I had my, you need to pass an exam in American Immigration Office. I'm going, guess what? The lead examiner was my student in the university. So instead of talking about exam, we talked about nonsense. Yes,
Did you pass?
yeah, I did.
I'm just wondering, because Simon Shimon Agranat was American born,
American, right.
and he brought with him his reverence for the Constitution, our constitutional system.
Right.
What do you think might have been if there was if a Sabra was the Chief Justice and was without that same sensibility or sensitivity?
Oh, it
whatever,
has nothing to do. I mean,
in terms of the Constitution.
no, the Supreme Court justice is one out of. You need to have a plurality of voices.
Well, let's say he wasn't even on the court.
Well,
okay.
the personal point that I have, the
Okay.
first Supreme Court Justice of Israel was an uncle of my father.
Oh, wow.
When I look at the picture, it's the same identical face as my dad. And I didn't go into it. In 1952, the Minister of Justice is a guy by the name of Dov Yosef, Bernard Joseph from England. And he said that he wrote a letter from the Knesset, from the podium. He said, I'm upset with the Israeli Supreme Court. They don't follow our advice and instructions. So Moshe Zmora sent him a letter that cease and desist from interfering in activities of the Supreme Court. He didn't open the letter, send it back to the Supreme Court. What happened next is very interesting. It has to do with Israeli politics. They had build a new coalition. Dov Yosef, thank goodness, was not anymore Minister of Justice. Pinchas Rosen, who was born in Germany, became a Minister of Justice, 1953. The first issue on his desk was to make sure that Supreme Court justices are elected for life. They have a tenure. Once this law passed, guess what? We had a resolution of the Kol Ha'am, the newspaper issue. They were afraid to discuss it before they got tenure. Unreal, huh? She didn't write about it. She should have written about this one. At the beginning, Supreme Court was located on the Russian compound, which was a facility to keep up prisoners. A dump. You can visit it today. It only in the early 60s they removed it, or 90s, up to the 1990s, they moved it where it is today, very respectable facility near the Knesset. It tells you something about the labor movement, idea about the court and Supreme Court. It's not that important. They need to follow what we want, but they stood their ground. And this is very important to note, regardless of if they're American or Pinchas Rosen from Germany, and or my late uncle of my dad was from Germany with affiliation to Poland. So they had a sense that it has to be a democracy. I want to mention one more thing. How important is freedom of expression? It's unbelievably important. I work with Arabs in Arab countries. Maybe I'll give a class on this one too. And they told me, also people who work in the Palestinian Authority, we look at you with envy because you are an open society. Everybody can express his opinion. We don't.
In the case of Rabbi Meir Kahana, when his party was outlawed in Israel, was there some sort of law against racist speech or fascist speech or something, or was it explicit activities that he was doing?
No, the speech, the racism, we'll talk about it in a different class. It's a major element that needs to be discussed. After that, Israel is divided up to 67 and after 67. It's a totally different country in view of the circumstances of occupation of a different land.
My son, who's a lawyer, basically his question pertaining to the Supreme Court is, if there's no constitution, what is it that the Supreme Court can base its judgments on?
Oh, well, you have basic laws that were written from 1988 to 1994. One of the orchestrator of this basic laws, or Dan Meridor, is a Minister of Justice on a joint government, both of Likud and Labor. It's about human dignity of human right. There are all slew of laws. You can access it on Wikipedia, or we can do it at different class on this one. And reference to the Declaration of Independence. But look, constitution can work and cannot work. I mentioned it. In all the communist countries, they have wonderful constitutions. All the Arab countries have unbelievable constitutions. Banana Republic in South America, whenever a new dictator came, he wrote a constitution. Beautiful constitution.
Yeah,
They don't.
Britain doesn't have a constitution. It's still a solid democracy. It can be and it cannot be a solid democracy, but freedom of expression is a major, important, solid foundation for democracy. Alan, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. You had mentioned some of the justices and the fact that they came from Europe, or in case of Agranov from the US. Were there justices that were Mizrahi?
Oh, yeah. Not only Mizrahi, Arabs.
Okay, and did they have a different approach to?
I need to research. I need to read about
Okay.
it, yeah.
All right, no, I was just
No,
wondering because
the Mizrahi, most of them were educated in the Hebrew University. So they have the education of the Israeli judicial system, which is influenced very much by the American and by the British law.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if they had like the same reverence.
But the people who came from Germany were educated under the Weimar Republic, which was very open and democratic.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Aryeh,
Yes,
I just wanted to make a comment about the issue of the relationship between the Constitution and what are norms for a society. And it's clear that you can have a constitution and it means nothing. But what is being established with, as the justices are arguing, establishing new norms without a constitution. But here's how we will conduct, they're setting the rules. And if everybody agrees to them, they become better than a constitution.
absolutely. Important point. Yeah, you have a norm. The norm. It's not only declarative, and it's for the book. It's also for implementation, and this is most important, especially with such fringe group like the communists. They are allowed to express their opinion in spite of the fact they are the mouthpiece of the Soviet Union of Stalin. And they were funded and gathered money from the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War. And for Israel, which is true, Israel was a non-aligned country up to 1950. Then the Korean War, Ben-Gurion realized, he was a smart guy. He said, this is a bipolar world. We are going with America. We are a democracy. We are siding with America in the vote in the United Nations for whatever they want to do. And that's where Israel became totally affiliated with the United States. And the Soviet Union decided to break into the Middle East by supporting Arab countries from 1953 on.
When 1956, when Khrushchev, the 20th Party Congress in Moscow,
Right,
had the anti-Stalinist speech,
right.
how did the Israeli Communist Party cover that, or what's their stance?
You know that the Israel discovered this speech. Israeli agents were the people who discovered the Khrushchev speech and brought it to the attention of the Eisenhower administration. The way that it was done is that the secretary who typed the speech was affiliated or connected by romantic relationship to a Mossad agent in Moscow. As far as I know, we are taping this. As far as I recall the story. Disclaimer, if my memory doesn't betray me, but for certainty, it was discovered by Israeli agent, transferred to the CIA, and Israel got some accolade and unbelievable thank you from the Eisenhower administration at the time. And this is a very important point of discussion, the issue of an open press. You remember that when Sharansky was released from prison, he wrote a book and he said, democracy is when you're standing in a public square and you can speak out your mind. If you don't have this particular fundamental element, there is nothing. So here is something for the record. I'm in Jordan, in Amman, in 2010, and I'm standing in a supermarket, and I'm talking to the owner of the supermarket. All of a sudden, you have on the screen, a Prime Minister of Israel went to jail for corruption, and that was Olmert. Olmert, who was a very progressive Prime Minister, but he has some kind of personal failing in terms of corruption. Went to jail, I think, for 2 years. And I was thinking the prime minister, this guy in the supermarket will bash the Israeli, knew that I'm an Israeli. And that he will say, what kind of a system that you have with corruption, prime minister corrupt is going to jail. And then he said, when are we going to be a democracy like Israel that expose corruption and punish them? We will never see it in our lifetime. And then I realized how important it is, exposure and writing it in a newspaper. It's not vulnerability, it's strength. And when you are afraid to publish, then we are in trouble.
In Chicago, we used to have a place called Bughouse Square downtown. My father used to take me when I was in high school. Probably none of you ever heard of it, but anybody could get up and give a speech, whether it was a communist, a Democrat, a Republican, anybody.
Wow.
And it was a great learning experience. My father would take me on Saturday
Down
night,
by the Newberry Library.
right across the street from the Newberry Library, right?
Wow.
Well, it's like if you've been in London.
Yes.
Hyde Park,
Yeah.
in
In
Hyde
Hyde
Park,
Park.
Park
right,
on a
to the present
Sunday.
day. Yeah, and it's very important.
It is. You learn all kinds of things.
I'll tell you a fun story. Haifa, where I was born, was considered to be a red city. I still recall a May parade. I mean,
May 1st, parade.
you remember?
No, well, I remember when Stalin died. so
That,
yes.
yeah, I
Yeah.
remember it too. I don't remember it, but my lullabies were in Russian and Polish. And in 1965, because it was a red city and it was so progressive, guess who came to Haifa to Bet Akranot? You remember Bet Akranot? Bet Akranot is a square, now it's a dump place. Pete Seeger comes and all of a sudden give a concert at Guantanamera. He sits with a guitar and plays. For the first time, I see Pete Seeger. Oh, what do I know? Who is Pete? I was 14 years old. Unbelievable. They're set on the steps and
And you remember. I was in Mongolia about 10, 12 years ago, and I was in this fancy hotel with my friend who's a travel agent. And we happened to walk around the back of the hotel, and there was a statue of Stalin. They had moved it and hidden it.
But I remember when Stalin died. I mean, I was
I was
little,
5 years old, yeah.
but I remember my Romanian neighbors had a huge picture of Stalin.
Oh, really?
Just, on the window,
Wait,
and they were crying.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking, what were you crying about?
My mother-
Really,
They like
what they
I
did to
don't
you.
worshiping. It's
My-
like probably
Oh,
was
they-
Korea, North
they were-
Korea.
My mother, I remember, she said, we'll talk about this at home, because of course, there was always a difference in how we spoke in the public square.
In
and
the public
private
or in the
square
private.
In Romania. And my father's store was on the opposite side of the square, and there was a demonstration, people were walking counterclockwise. And we had to walk counterclockwise, and I kept saying to my mother, we always walk clockwise. That's where the pastry shop is. And she said, no, we're gonna walk counterclockwise because we're very sad that Mr. Stalin died. And who is he? He's a very big man. Now in Hungarian, the word for great and big are the same word. So my mother said to me, he was a big man. And I said, did he go all the way to the sky? Because everybody was pretending to cry.
Right.
It was all pretense.
To save
Yeah.
yourself.
And then they had a rebellion in Hungary.
Yeah.
Okay, my friend, now we exhausted more or less this issue. We are moving to arms in Israel. And I would like to start with the article of Itamar Rabinovich. Itamar Rabinovich was the last job of his was the president of Tel Aviv University. He was a specialist on Syria. He was the advisor of the late Prime Minister Rabin negotiation with Syria for a peace treaty that never materialized, thank goodness, in view of what is happening in Syria. And he was an Israeli ambassador to the United States, I think, under Rabin administration. And so this is the background of the person. What do you think about this from Arab Israeli to Palestinian Israelis, roughly?
It's kind of confusing. The Palestinians referred in the beginning to any Arab outside of Israel.
Hmm?
One thing
Well,
that is, one thing that was amazing to me is evolution of more of the awareness of Israel, of Palestine, Arabs that were Israeli citizens, their gradual evolution into a much more nationalistic sensitivity. Even though what also strikes me as confusing to me is they support their brothers and sisters in self-determination in a Palestinian state, but you ask, would you move to the Palestinian state from Israel? And Israeli Arabs are like, no. You know, that to me is like amazing. It's like, oh, yeah, you can make your own state, but we're not going to be there with you.
Right. Okay. I would like to move to the very beginning, 1947 to everything before 1967. How the definition of Arabs in Israel is. What is the definition of them?
Israeli Arabs.
Israeli Arab or the sector? I recall the reference to the sector. It's unbelievable.
The sector.
The sector.
Yeah.
It's a euphemism. You don't want. It's like the other, but we don't talk much about. We don't see them. They live. If this is important, they live in under military government. So all the Arab villages where if you're an Arab living in a village in the Galilee, which is mostly Arab at the time, you need a special permit from a military governor to go out of your village. If you want to travel to Tel Aviv or Haifa, you need a permit. You cannot move. You don't. If they didn't have access to be in, to offices in government positions. Mostly where they were employed in pharmaceutical. Most of the pharmacists in Israel are Arabs. If you want to get an education, you are affiliated mostly either to Labour Party, satellite party, or to the Communist Party. If you're a member of the Communist Party, guess what? Moscow will take care of you. You go to study medicine not in Russia, in Romania.
In Romania.
In Romania, mostly in Romania, pharmacy and
during the 50s and 60s, you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, in 69, he had an accident somewhere, and we went to cut his face and needed stitches. We went to a small place. They took him to
in Israel.
Yeah, and it was an Arab doctor. Yeah, he was really wonderful.
Yeah,
very
it
nice.
is. To the present day, in Israeli hospitals, you have at least 50% of the doctors are Arabs. My mother, who died of heart failure, her last doctor, chief of department, an Arab. And nurses are Arab. And it's very interesting when you have a late night conversation with women who work in hospitals. I'm talking like 2000. I had a conversation with a nurse who took care of my mother, chief of the floor, and she said, "I'm an Arab Christian. Where on the world will I get in the Arab universe a position as a chief nurse? Only in the Jewish Israel." And she said, after midnight, no one heard her. This is the public space, public square issues.
By the way, it cost $6 for him to sew that up. That was it.
That's public health.
69.
Public health. In
קופת
Italy,
חולים.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's free.
It's
almost
free, but it isn't so good.
It's not so good. It depends. It's low.
It was still the best data in terms of statistics for the United States to use in the COVID situation. It was still Israel that was leading the world because it had three data points, three data sets that could be combined to one. The United States had 1 million.
No way. Okay, let's not go there. We are with the Arabs.
Okay. Arabs.
Comments?
I attended a lecture at Rutgers University where an Arab American woman stood up and talked about the fantastic education that she got as an Arab in Haifa. That's where she grew up, and she was a researcher at that point at Rutgers University. I'm talking about maybe 22, 25 years ago.
Wow.
And she was, I mean,
Was she Christian or Muslim?
I don't know.
That's important.
I don't know, but she said she went to, and her family chose to send her to a Jewish speaking, Hebrew speaking high school
Oh,
because it was the best education.
which one?
I don't know. In Haifa.
In Haifa, the best
Yes.
is Reali.
The best high school that could be gotten, and it was free, and what a fantastic education. And she was in class with Jewish Hebrew speakers, and they knew she was not a Jewish Hebrew speaker, that she was an Arab Hebrew speaker. So I just want to tell you that we were shocked. We were surprised. We were in the middle of New Jersey, and the lecture hall was full of the Jewish organizations, but she stood up and basically defended
Israel.
Israel.
We have a question.
Yes.
So I was just gonna remark, one of the things I found interesting in the reading was when they talked about people who were defined as Israeli Arabs versus Palestinians voting largely with blocks of Israelis, like kind of the way that they implied kind of voting against their interests. So I highlighted it. I found it interesting.
Yeah. All of them have a right to vote, and most of their affiliation are to labor-oriented parties.
Okay, I have a question. How are we defining Arab? Are we just saying non-Jews? Are we saying specifically Muslims? Are we saying Palestinians?
Well, what we did last week, we went through the Israeli ID, and today you don't have an ID, you have only Israeli. Once it was defined as a nationality and religion, they took it out. In the past 20 years, there is no definition of religion or nationality. It's only the name.
But Ori, do you mean just for the purposes of discussion, which group, which subset we are talking about when we say Arab Israelis?
Well, I think my question is, the term Arab has changed in definition over time. And certainly as we talk about Israel between 48 and 67, it might be different than in a more modern way. But it's sort of in my mind, it's a nebulous term because you can't nail down anything about the person.
Nebulous term. Well, always circumstances decide the way that you view people. And before 67, they were a subdued minority. You didn't see them physically because of the what is known mishtar tzvai, government enclave that control movement of Arabs, with the exception of Haifa and Yafo, which had the only place where Arab could move freely was in Haifa and Yafo. The others were restricted in their movement, and you really didn't see them unless you went to Arab villages, passed by car or by bus.
Well, we lived with Arabs,
In Haifa, I
Haifa.
thought Haifa is an open city, yes.
and there was never a problem, never.
We went to eat in the food shops. The hummus is unbelievable. And we used to go to two movie theaters, one Carmel Ganim with open roof, and also Hadar with open roof.
Yeah, and in Haifa down, there was quinoa. It just slipped my mind that we used to go to.
A movie theater?
Yeah,
Carmel Ganim.
yeah, okay. So I remember going there with my parents. And it was very primitive. I mean, there was like one bathroom and it was, and so,
I never used bathroom in this theaters.
well, it's a good thing that you didn't, because if I needed to go to the bathroom, my mother pulled my pants down and I peed on the
Yippee.
floor.
Like
And
in
the
India.
pee just ran down. No,
Okay.
That's another
With
class.
this graphic, we'll move to.
Is that why everybody got along? Because the Arab and the Israeli Jew, the Israeli Arab.
They
and the Jew-
didn't meet.
Because there wasn't this thing about who's gonna run the state, or there's gonna be two states, right?
I mean, it was sort of
Two
interesting.
nations.
Terry's cousin, always, along with teaching at Tel Aviv University, always taught in an Arab college as a Jewish professor. And her husband, when he was still practicing medicine, usually practiced in Arab communities as a Jewish physician. Back into the 60s here.
The situation changed in 1966, where Levi Eshkol became prime minister. Ben Gurion wanted to keep separating the Arabs throughout. And when he lost and basically went into political wilderness, Levi Eshkol became the leader of the Mapai party, and he immediately dismantled this government, military government, and Arabs were allowed to move around as they pleased, and that was the situation. Now 67 comes and it changed everything. Because they can meet with Arabs, Palestinians who are in the West Bank. And they can meet and go and travel all the way to later on in the 1990s to Jordan or to Egypt. It's open border. You have peace with Jordan and Egypt. So they mingle and go all the way, really all over the Middle East. They can go, Israeli Arabs.
Were the Israeli Arabs allowed to go to the Arab countries that were boycotting Israel?
No,
Because they had Israeli
here is this. They can go, look, they can go cross the border to Jordan and to Egypt. What they do there, who knows? I know you have no problem. I think, I'm not sure. I think they can go to Syria, or they can go to the Saudi Arabia and to the Gulf. But you mingle with all kind of groups. I saw, for example, I was hosted by people from the University of Jordan, and I went to a camp that was ruled by Hamas. I saw people with machine guns, all of them Hamas. So if you are an Israeli Arab, you can mingle with them too. There was one situation, here is the story. A member of the Israeli parliament, an Arab by the name Azmi Bishara, was convicted in absentia being a spy for Iran. He gave them location in 2006 of Israeli installation, and because he was put on trial in absentia, he relocated to the Gulf state. And for a while, for 10 years, he continued to receive a salary of member of the Israeli Knesset. They had to pass a legislation to prevent him from getting the salary. Unreal story.
You say that the Arab terrorist groups, that some of them are Shiite, right? Some of them are Sunni. Do they think they're like, they just get along, I guess, because it's all against Israel, or do they fight?
Well, I think in Israel, I don't think you have Shia. I think you have only Sunni.
Okay, so it's only in Lebanon.
In Lebanon, you have the division. Yeah, in Lebanon, the Shia are affiliated nowadays to and received fund from Iran. But something about the Israeli Arabs, they are moving into all kind of extremes since the 2000s. You have pragmatists who want to fit into the country, and then you have the Islamist fundamentalists. You have fundamentalists of the north and fundamentalists of the south who want to create an Islamic country. So it's very complicated. I wonder if you recall a few years ago, Ari Shavit wrote about a book, My Promised Land.
Yeah.
And that he is considered to be a very open-minded, and at the time he was criticized because he's very leftist in a way, but not really, because he writes in his book about a very good friend when he traveled in the Galilee, and this guy is telling him, a leftist and progressive, he said, we don't want you here. We would have preferred to be a desert rather than live in advanced economically and culturally country, but we want to be our own people without intervention of Jewish people in our lives. We would like you to disappear altogether. And then Ari Shavit said, well, then I realized we have a much bigger problem. I met Ari Shavit on this one in a conversation when we had our Middle East program, and we brought to him a Palestinian to speak to. And that's how I realized that he has a very, very, it's not a tunnel vision, he sees the complexity of the situation.
Have you ever eaten at Maya, the restaurant on Oak Park Avenue? It's owned by a wonderful Palestinian guy. He lives in
Is it a
the
good food?
forest. It's, he is, he's a great
Well,
guy.
he was our mayor for 2 terms.
That's right.
Oh,
Well, people treated him very poorly, and he had a meeting with the police chief one night, and some people came and broke all his furniture in his yard and threw eggs at his house, and
Not Jewish people.
no, it was a black group who was against the police chief because he was meeting with him.
Harry's Corey's friend.
What?
It's
Yeah, okay, I cannot. You are breaking. He's still in the.
From
I cannot hear you.
Ori, the connection is, your
Yeah, we
connection
don't-
is
we have
bad.
a
You're in
weak
bad
connection.
place.
I would disagree. I will say. But even when we got there, she's very bad.
Okay. I cannot hear.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's still cutting in and out. Ron, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
you need to find a special, a better place to talk. Okay. We are, so we see the complexities about the Arabs. You notice one thing that I ask you to look at the tables. of 1992 and 1996 election, how Arabs are voting in the 90s, which is very important.
1990 what and six?
1992 and 1996. You have the breakdown. Just look at the table.
Well, it's a total flip-flop, right? It's
Yeah.
completely opposite, almost entirely opposite from what it was from 1992 to 1996. The go, I don't have the table in front of me, but it's 40% to 60%, I think, or maybe 30 to 7. Yeah. And then it flip-flops from 40% to 60% to 60% and 40%. Like it almost exactly flip-flops, reverses.
And it's very important, and it tells you when Labour was in power and Rabin was the prime minister, and he promised broad reform in support of Arab needs and basically giving funds to create a much better infrastructure in Arab communities. They responded in kind. 61% are voting Labour. And that tells you that pragmatism at that time won. When Netanyahu comes to power, from 1996, he is in the mainstream Israeli politics, unfortunately. The reverse is happening. 37, 30 some are for the religion.
But he kind of noticed that that Rabin was assassinated by the Jews.
Right, and the only problem, of course, in the Israeli political parlance is when Rabin or Labour are in power and voting, the slogan was, "You are winning just because of the Arab vote, not because of Jewish. We Jews are not connected to Arabs. If the Arab voting for you, it's not fully democratic." And that's the sloganeering of the Likud all the time. To the present day, like, if you recall, before Netanyahu, there was a coalition government that cobbled together all these anti-Netanyahu people, and it was supported by Arabs. And they said, this is not a kosher, so to speak, government, Arab supported. So it's a problem in the Israeli political man. Yeah.
You mentioned Jordan earlier. During the British Mandate, you had this Transjordan. How did Transjordan deal with different from current day Jordan as far as the actual territory is concerned?
How Jordan is dealing with what?
Well, in the British Mandate, you had Transjordan, right?
Right.
Now you have Jordan. How did they differ as far as actual territory?
Oh, the British separated between the trans and created a new state in Jordan, which was very much to the present day affiliated to the British government. I mean, the Brits are supporting them militarily. In 1970, there was Black September. They tried to kill Hussein, the prime minister. Now I have a personal story. I was in what was it in a tank division that came to defend Jordan, and our division went to the border with Syria to prevent the Syrians from invading Jordan. September of 1970. So Israel is basically the de facto protector of the Jordanian kingdom. And of course, everything is done clandestinely. No one talks about it publicly, but that's really is the situation from 1970 on. In 1973, I mean, the relationship was unbelievably very good from 1973. King Hussein flew before the Yom Kippur War, he flew to Tel Aviv to meet with Prime Minister Meir, and he told her there is going to be war soon. You're going to be to
Okay.
face war. And this time the Jordanian did not. They stood on the sideline. They have a particular interest. If you recall, in 1950 or 1951, a Palestinian killed King Abdullah in Jerusalem in the Temple Mount as he was coming to pray. And the Jordanian never forgot it. In 1970, they tried to, Arafat and his troop tried to kill King Hussein. So the Jordanian are very, very suspicious and I would say hateful of the Palestinians. Mostly they are Bedouins. The
Didn't
Jordanian.
Didn't the Jordanians throw out the Palestinian nationalist
Now
faction?
today in Jordan, the new king Abdullah, he married to a Palestinian woman, and so he tried to create some kind of a coalition. Half of Jordan is Palestinian. In contrast to all the Arab countries, a refugee Palestinian, when he comes to Jordan, becomes a Jordanian with all the benefits, the Jordanian passport, and he is totally incorporated into Jordan. But still, the military establishment is totally in the hand of the Bedouins. So, and the military as is. Now we are moving to the other article that I asked you to read.
A long one?
The long one. They're not that long.
As a final exam.
What page? Which page is it normal?
Chapter 1, Arab representation in the Jewish state. No.
I'm talking about the Arab, the Yeridor, the Al-Ard. Al-Ard 1965. That was a big story at the time. I mean, it really, in a way, what we said up to now, it very much reinforces what we said. Why did it allow this party to run for Israeli election in 65?
I was there in 65. I'm trying to remember what,
How old were you?
I was in college.
Oh, you should have remembered. It was a big story at the
I was an
time.
engineer. Remember, I had no knowledge of anything but engineering at that point.
What was the question? Why did they allow?
Why Al-Ard was the Supreme Court denied them the opportunity
Because
to,
they thought that their purpose in life was to defeat Israel.
right.
That's right.
So how does this, and she is bringing the case, how does it relate, conflict with freedom of expression of Kol Ha'am and
Well, it seemed to me that the main takeaway was meant to be the freedom of speech aspect of it, and not the actual decision, because the decision was reversed just a few years later in his opposing decision that he made both decisions, right, Agornaut, but that the main idea was the Declaration of Independence being the legalese, so to speak. Yeah.
okay. More views.
I think Agronaut also basically said the one way you could restrict is if it's threatening the security of the state.
Mhm. And he's using in his mind, according to Lahav, he's looking at the speech that Lincoln gave when there was a secession of the South. And basically, you need to fight because they want to dismantle the country. It's not that you have a situation of two opposing views. It's either or situation. If they want to dismantle you, they are not allowed, and it's undemocratic to let them run in election. I mean, the idiom of the American Civil War is guiding, according to this interpretation, Agronaut view. And so now you need to present a case that how do you know that Al-Ard is anti the Jewish state? So they went to all kind of reference from Arab world, from Jordan, from Lebanon, from Egypt, that they cited Al-Ard as something that is pan-Arabic, pan-Islam, and they want to create a state that is blending in the hemisphere of Arab world. The Jews have no place in that.
Just the name meant land, and that was
Our
something to
land.
them. Yeah, as a declaration of war.
Yeah, here is something that I would like to share with you.
I'm sorry, can you hold up? Did it, the readings called it the land. If it was our land, it would have been different to me. I was thinking that it was a point of contention that had to do with the land and background and history, as opposed to somebody's ownership or right to possession of it, as in the Palestinians or the Israelis.
Right. It's basically our land.
Right. They said it was theirs, right?
Right. And that's the issue. And when you read all their leadership, they express it in writing and in poetry, and they deny the right of the Jews to have their own land. Now, this is connected to the present tragic conflict in the Middle East. When you read continuously about, well, you have the settlement going on, which is terrible in my opinion, but there is a context. In 1999 and 2000, there was almost an agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. When Barak was the prime minister, Clinton the president, and Arafat were invited to the White House, and the Israelis offered them to give up 96% of the West Bank, including sovereignty over the Temple Mount and the Arab quarters of East Jerusalem for peace. And they declined. Arafat said, well, it's not for me to make the decision. It's an issue that the diaspora, Palestinians need to make it. I cannot make giving up and recognize the state of Israel as is and give up on the right of return of refugees to Israel, which in practical terms mean no Israel. I mean, you allow 4 or 5 million people, descendant of 1948, to come back. Who in his right mind will allow it? Neither the Labour Party, nor the Likud, of course not the Likud, no one will allow it. And because of this situation, in the year 2000, there was the demise of the labor movement in Israel, just because of this, because they realized there is really no one to talk to. Up to the year 2000, labor were about 40–50% of the people. Now labor doesn't exist anymore. There is no labor movement in Israel. They barely make it to the enter the Knesset with 4 members. And that was the key point. When Israelis left and right realized there is no one really to talk to. And here I'm, for the record, I'll say what I heard in the Mokata. I was in the Mokata 4 times. From a member of the and I will not mention the name because they will kill him. So he said the following to me privately: our tragedy, we didn't have a Ben Gurion to make the right decision. We're unable to say publicly in the public square that we are giving up the right of return. There is no one who can do it. If they do it, they will kill him. So I said to him, so where is the leadership? Where is the courage? Where is the responsibility for the benefit of the whole people? He said, that's our tragedy. There is no one who can speak up and make the right decision. Yeah.
The
So
map, I'm sorry, is it not true that the map that was kept secret showed that the Arab or Palestinian state to be would be divided into so many little Bantustans or whatever you like, that it was not workable. And there was a huge propaganda on this. I thought maybe you could address that, but I realize the time is late. But I wanted to at least put that on the.
Hey, we need a special class on that. We are
Absolutely.
almost.
Yeah.
But it's not true. It was not cantonized. It was a very there were a very good way how to create a viable and still a viable Palestinian state, much better than the situation that we are experiencing here. But you need to give up on the right of return. You don't give up on the right of return. No one in his right mind will agree to peace. In contrast, when Sadat came to Israel and made a peace with Israel, okay? Israel dismantled this beautiful township of Yamit, and I was there as a soldier to dismantle it. And I was in a roadblock with machine gun and blocked the advance of settlers from the West Bank. I told them, if you move 1 inch with the bus, I will blow up your tires. And we did it, and it worked. It's not like imaginary peace between Sweden and other countries in Europe, but the situation with Egypt is workable. I mean, there is no war, and there is a joint activities to dismantle ISIS in the Sinai. And there is tourism and Israeli tourism in Egypt. So if you give up sincerely the right of return and recognize Israel as a sovereign state, the political map in Israel will shift dramatically. If not, it will never be resolved.